Today we will hear the startup stories behind two of Idaho's most successful technology companies. Many of you may not have known that until a short time ago, the largest privately held technology company in Idaho was located just across Capitol Street from us on the river in the Lusk neighborhood. Our speakers today, Ms. Eileen Langdon-Barber and Mr. Brad Wiskerson, will talk about that company, Kinetics, and its two powerhouse spin-offs that have helped to establish Boise as a tech hub. These companies are ClickBank and Kount. ClickBank was founded in 1998 as a wholly owned subsidiary of Kinetics. As one of the largest online retailers with patent affiliate tracking, ClickBank has a vast offering of more than 500,000 products, making sales in 180 countries with over $500 billion in lifetime gross sales. Kount was founded in 2007 and has been owned by CVC Capital Partners, Kinetics, Brad Wiskerson, and other management team members since 2015. Kount is a leading digital fraud prevention solution used by 6,500 plus brands globally, including many that you're going to know, like Staples, Dunkin', Tesla, British Petroleum, AMC, and New Balance, as well as some of the world's largest payment service providers and processors such as Chase, Venmo, and PayPal/Braintree. Before we hear from them, I'd like to share a little bit about each of our speakers with you. It's a real treat to have them here in our college, and we're very grateful for their willingness to share their stories with us. Eileen Langdon-Barber, co-founder of Kinetics, along with Jeff Hoyle and Dr. Timothy Barber in 1998, has served on its board of directors since that time. Eileen has been involved in the continued growth and expansion of Kinetics and subsidiaries ClickBank and Kount, building a global reputation for quality solutions in the e-commerce industry. In addition to her continued service on Kinetics and its subsidiary boards of directors, Eileen has served Kinetics in various capacities, including president of Kinetics from 1998 to 2005, corporate treasurer, audit committee member, and compensation committee member. Eileen currently serves on the board of several nonprofits, including the Idaho Shakespeare Festival, Boise State University Foundation, Trailhead, and Small Village Foundation. Eileen earned her Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Virginia Tech. Brad Wiskerson is the founding CEO of Kount and a member of its board of directors. He joined Kinetics in 2005 as its CEO and has continued to serve on Kinetics and ClickBank's boards since that time. Brad was chair of the board of the Salt Lake City branch of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco in 2014 and 2015. He was a member of the board for 3 years prior to serving as chair. He currently serves on the high-level advisory group of the International Monetary Fund's Interdepartmental Working Group on Finance and Technology. He was awarded a Juris Doctor from the University of Notre Dame and a Bachelor of Arts from Brigham Young University. I'd also like to introduce two members of our faculty panel today, Rick Ritter and Sean Mattingly, who both teach in Kobe's entrepreneurship program. Rick Ritter is an adjunct faculty member in the college and serves on as lab director for New Ventures Lab, a hybrid co-working facility located in Meridian that is focused on turning ideas into business. He has worked extensively across the state with individuals and companies, assisting them to discover the economic value of their ideas. He has started and successfully operated 5 businesses to date. Sean Mattingly is an assistant professor of strategy at Boise State University. Sean has spent many years helping startups with strategy development and exit processes and consults with both profit and nonprofit organizations. He is actively engaged in research on corporate strategy, technology commercialization, and entrepreneurial cognition. Rick and Sean will get the ball rolling with our questions and answer session. And I encourage you and the audience, students, community members, to be ready with your questions when we get to that stage. That Eileen and Brad will answer anything that you'd like to know about the presentation today. With that, I hand it over to Eileen and Brad, but let's give them a warm Boise State welcome as we start today.
Okay, can you hear me? So I think this session, this is our second time speaking today. We just spoke to the 130-101 class, and they played the Irish gig music for a lot longer. I think you guys only heard it for just one song worth. Cheryl Larrabee likes to play music. She asked what type of music to play. As a joke, I said it should be an Irish gig because Brad has been known to be in a dance-off. And, yeah.
To win a dance.
To win, and he won it. And it was, yeah, Irish dancing.
Second place is just first.
So, but anyways, what I was going to say is my two things is don't try to be funnier than Brad and don't try and beat him in a dance-off. So I am going to start my talk with a quote because, you know, you're always told that you should start with either a funny story or a quote. I'm not competing with Mr. Wiskerson. So these two characters up here, this is a JFK quote. When written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger and one represents opportunity. And that was in 1959. Today, I'll be sharing with you one of ClickBank's first crisis situations and how it became an opportunity. And it was a true sink or swim moment for our company. We were at the beginning of something big and didn't even realize it at the time. And this ultimately, much, much later, led us to creating another entirely new company, Kount. Okay, so before going into the story of ClickBank, I just want to set the stage. It's 1998. And I know a lot of you here weren't even born, I'm guessing. It's 1998, and the internet had proven itself to be a major mass medium because there's a lot of people that thought it was just going to be a passing fad. So back then, you'll recognize some of these companies. Some still exist. Some don't exist, or they have a different, like Amazon.com, Earth's biggest bookstore. I think, you know, they're everything now. Okay, so there was Netscape, AltaVista, Yahoo, AOL, Lycos, Napster, Ask Jeeves, and co-hosting sites such as AngelFire, GeoCities, MySpace. There was eBay and Amazon, and I'm quoting a 1998 money.cnn.com article where they described it as the decidedly unprofitable Amazon. And then notice that PayPal's not on this slide. In 1998, there was no PayPal because PayPal was just a twinkle in continuity, which then later became X.com, just a twinkle in their eyes. And let's not forget brick and mortar retailers. They wanted in on this .com frenzy, and almost every store created an online presence practically overnight simply by adding .com to their name. So, okay, back then we were on dial-up and the internet was slow, like painfully slow. It was so slow that the speed was measured in kilobytes, and that's small and it's slow. Today, anything less than 6 megabytes per second, and we are miserable. So, and also back then, VC funding, venture capital funding for internet companies and the mergers and acquisitions, the buzzword at the time was traffic. It seemed like there was a very brief period of time where return on investment, or ROI, didn't seem to matter. And then people who were selling their companies made out like bandits, and they were acquired for crazy multiples based solely on traffic because these acquiring companies believed that somehow they would magically turn traffic into money. So now I'm going to start the story of the World Wide Web, which also is back in the 90s when it was also new. It was the Wild Wild West. So Tim and I started filing patents in 1997, and we were a true garage startup. We were in San Diego, and we had a half-car, I don't even know what a half-car garage means, but we walled that off, and I guess it's an area for a workbench, but there happened to be a window, and we call it the 6x12. So we were able to fit 2 desks and a printer, and I think we even had a bookshelf in there. It was amazing we were able to fit in that little 6-by-12-foot office. But that's where we started ClickBank, in our garage. We started filing patents in 1997 on micropayments, payments, and affiliate tracking. We met Jeff Hoyle, and he was a retired CEO of international publicly traded mining company. And we met him through a mutual friend by phone in December 1997, and then we met him in person in January 98. And from our very first meeting, Jeff wanted to be involved. We incorporated a couple months later in April 1998 as Kinetics, And we received funding by our one and only investor for ClickBank, that's Jeff Hoyle. We bootstrapped our system, and we knew nothing about the banking and credit card world. We, at the time, we had postcards come in the mail, like when you register as a company, you get like all types of advertisements. So I don't think it was completely random. I don't know how we picked the company that we picked, but we selected it was Card Services International, and we picked them to do our merchant processing. And but they were forcing us to lease equipment, and we didn't get it. Like, why were they trying to make us lease equipment? Because we're doing everything online and the internet. They're like, well, that's what we do. We lease equipment. So we were paying for leased equipment that we never actually ever used. We didn't really understand anything about the credit card industry, and likewise, they didn't really know what we were doing either. But regardless, we persevered. We opened up our store online, and then we had our first transaction in September 1998. So, and it was exciting. This first couple of days the first 4 to 6 weeks were really exciting. We had transactions like, I don't remember, it was like 10 the first day, and every day kept doubling and more and more and more. And it was just like, it was just fun seeing that people are buying stuff online, and we're selling ebooks and software. So we're selling digital goods online. And I don't know the exact time, but seeing about 4 to 6 weeks later, all of a sudden we got a pile of chargebacks. And I did not say WTF because that acronym was not widely used at the time, so I actually said the words. Yeah, so I said the words, and then what was this? Like, so anyways, it was really confusing because, so for those of you who don't know what chargebacks are, because I certainly didn't know what they were at the time, the bank takes the money out of your merchant account and it gives it back to the customer. And they also give you a nice hefty chargeback fine for every single time there's a chargeback. So, and we were dumbfounded because we were like, well, we, like most stores, whether a physical store or an online store, you want to offer excellent customer service, like we would refund any dissatisfied customer, of course. So why do we have a pile of chargebacks? And so that's when Tim immediately started digging into like what's going on in this particular stack of chargebacks that we had. And we saw a pattern, and it looked like it was mostly due to criminal activity. And for the most part, that is true. There were, especially way back then, buying things online was a novelty. I think some people maybe just charged things back because they didn't recognize the name ClickBank.com on their credit card statement, but those were the one-offs. For the most part, it was rampant criminal activity, and we figured out how to stop it in real time. And we had to do that. Like, we had to do that to survive because we realized otherwise it was an unsustainable business model. Our price point at that point was for these digital goods that we're selling online were about $5 to $20. And so we're out the money. It's a digital product, so we're not really out like a physical product. But we're, minus the money, and we're getting fined more than what our average price point was. So it was clearly not sustainable. And then we're also trying to figure out why were we seeing this fraud. We did have built-in affiliate tracking, so there was some affiliate fraud that was going on. But the other thing that we felt like was happening is we felt like ClickBank was being used as an online gas station. So in the real world, when someone steals a wallet and they have credit cards, they will go to a gas station and check the card, go to Staples or Best Buy or wherever and buy TVs and printers and computers or whatnot. And if they're lucky, maybe and the card hasn't been canceled or flagged by their credit card company, they might go to the liquor store. Like, that's an actual pattern that they see with card present transactions. So we were an online store with card not present, and the trends and things that were happening out there was all new. So we were pretty sure that ClickBank was like being used as a test, and then people who had, because back then they didn't have to steal a wallet, they were like, again, it's the wild, wild west, they were just breaking into getting into databases and getting stolen credit card numbers. And so they sample the cards, and the damage that's being done to the big box merchants or the brick and mortar that had a .com presence was really substantial. The chargeback fee to them didn't matter like it did to us. It was nominal for them, but they're out the money and whatever the expensive item is, the printer, the computer. Anyway, we got up to speed really fast, learning all about chargebacks, learning how, because you lose your merchant account if you have chargebacks over 1%. And it varies from card brand to card brand, but it's roughly 1%. And then the other thing that we realized is we weren't supposed to be with Card Service International. We had to be with a member bank. And again, it's because we knew nothing. So we were like, wait, what's a member bank? And so we're getting educated. We're figuring things out. We luckily got a merchant account with Imperial Bank. This was in San Diego. And it was a great relationship with Imperial Bank. The fun story that I have from back in this is spring 1999. I have 2 kids, by the way. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old at the time, and they're now adults. They're in their 20s. So I got them off to school. Tim and I had crazy hours. We're entrepreneurs. We're like, you're burning the candle at all ends. It just happened to be a morning where we were dressed and showered and and presentable, and we get a knock at the door, and it's our Imperial Bank representative with the VP of Risk for Visa. And his name, and I still remember him in the visit to this day. His name is Terry Hutchinson, and he was fascinated by what we're doing because we're just like the small internet online retailer selling ebooks and software, and we're keeping our fraud down to 1%. And he just couldn't believe it. And so Tim showed him the system, they sat down for at least an hour, and this is our first time hearing those words. He's like, you guys should be a fraud scrubber for other merchants. And so the seed was planted. That was spring of 1999. In August of 99, we moved here to Boise, and we love Boise. So I think, just to have ClickBank grow and have its roots here in Boise has been, has just added to the success of our company. And actually, next slide, success. So Dean Bannister mentioned some of these numbers, so I don't need to say all those numbers again, but basically I feel like the success of our company, there's so many different things. Maybe some of these things will come up in Q&A and we can touch on some of these stories. But couple things is, in the beginning, like I said, the internet was so slow. We had a really fast loading and straightforward website. There was no pictures, no video. You just didn't do things back then in the 90s. But what people could get was information really quick. They could figure out how to be a ClickBank vendor, affiliate, or both. We were all about getting information, making it easy for people to sign up, a low barrier to entry. Then weirdly, I think the other thing that really added to our success is ignorance is bliss, is the thing that I always say. Ignorance is bliss. So what you don't know can be an asset. So now we were smart and we're good at figuring things out, and we can analyze and we can think about things. But I think that when you take on problems with a completely fresh perspective, that's when you're all of a sudden you're innovating and creating things. So it worked to our benefit. And then we did, I mentioned that me, Tim, and Jeff as the founders, that Jeff is our only investor. We did actually meet with some VCs, venture capital firms, and it didn't work out. I think they didn't understand our business model because we actually had a business model that showed us making money, and that was novel to them. No, but anyway, we didn't get the funding. But part of me, when I look back and really contemplate that, I think that it might have been for the best. Because if we had a whole bunch of funding, the more money you get, and you're not bootstrapping, the more money that the investors feel like that they're risking. And they may have forced us to use a known fraud control solution and all the fraud control solutions at the time would have been subpar because they were still used to card present, and there was just nothing like what we were doing. And then, let me just go back to here. So I truly feel like there's so many things as to why everything's been successful, but I know I want to turn it over to Brad really quick so he can finish. My quote back there was, again, in a crisis beware the danger, but recognize the opportunity. So in this case, the opportunity, which Brad's going to touch on next, is the founding of Kount, which happened much, much, much later. We probably should have been out there fighting fraud earlier. The seeds, the concept happened early, and yeah, I'm going to let Brad take over the Kount story.
Thanks, Eileen. I'm a pacer, so. So as Eileen said, necessity is the mother of invention, and we created Kount in order to protect our own merchant account. There was nothing else out there that was able to protect the kind of transactions that we were doing at ClickBank. ClickBank was basically a fantastic company in a rough neighborhood. And so we created a fraud control solution in order to protect that. And that's what we had in 2005 when I started as CEO of ClickBank and of Kinetics. And we quickly realized that what the seed that had been planted was a good idea. So in 2007, we'd been discussing it pretty constantly as a board up until this point. Tim Barber and I were at Raw Sushi on Vista Avenue in Boise, Idaho, having lunch, and it's the quintessential business plan on a napkin thing, because we literally over sushi mapped out what we thought would be a successful fraud control solution. And then we took that idea, and the Kinetics board decided that we would hire an industry consultant for a year because we had the financial wherewithal to do it. And we went out and surveyed the Internet Retail 100 and said, what are your points of pain with fraud? And what kind of a solution would you like to see in order to combat those points of pain? And I think that that process helped us ultimately develop what was a remarkably effective and solution that the market actually wanted. So, and now, here, fast forward to 2019, we went from that very small company initially, which was basically Tim, Eileen, me, Jeff Hoyle, and another board member, Jim Toon, started hiring people in order to create this company based on what we had learned in the surveys. And in 2019 now, this is going to be our global headquarters on the corner of 10th and Main in a month. And we're now doing business with the largest merchants in the world and payment processors, payment gateways, and acquiring banks. Like one of our fastest growing clients right now is Epic Games, who does Fortnite, and crazy transaction volumes. I didn't even know what it was till my 12-year-old son started playing it. Now I wish I didn't know what it was, but their checks cash. So unfortunately, fraud controls it's a growing industry. There's a lot more fraud out there. With each passing year, Visa and MasterCard enact new regulations which are meant to combat fraud. In fact, a lot of what they've done has increased fraud. We are in regular meetings with them. In fact, we're meeting with them in Park City on Monday and Tuesday, and it's the point of discussion. We told them at the time, okay, you're going to move to EMV on the card-present transactions, chip and PIN, and that'll stop a lot of the fraud on card-present transactions, but it's all going to flow to card-not-present transactions. So you're helping eliminate fraud in one of your channels, and in another you're escalating it 5, 6, 7, 8 times. And we'd had many discussions with them about that before they launched it. Then they launched it, and I'll be darned, we underestimated what it would do. So e-commerce fraud, online fraud, transactional fraud, fraud within apps has continued to rise. Now it's moving into account takeover fraud, which is very prevalent nowadays, where they'll take your account with, for example, Dunkin' Donuts is a client of ours, or Domino's Pizza is a client of ours. They'll get into your account and you've pre-populated it with cash, and they'll siphon out all the cash, which is a lot more profitable than just stealing a pizza, which they also do because bad guys eat pizza too. So, as Eileen indicated, this all came out of ClickBank and the technology that Tim Barber founded and that we were using at ClickBank long before we were using it at Kount. And two of the key innovations that helped us be successful in that bad neighborhood that ClickBank was in was multi-layer device fingerprinting. The very first patent in the world on device fingerprinting, identifying which device you're dealing with, which iPhone, which laptop computer, which desktop computer, which video game system you're dealing with, was invented and patented by Kinetics. And the second technology was proxy piercing. We have the first patent on proxy piercing. So it looks like you're doing transactions with Brad Wiskirchen in Boise, Idaho, but in fact, the transaction started in Kazakhstan and was routed through proxies in Korea and Russia, and before it finally hit your system. So Tim invented a way whereby we could pierce those proxies and in real time, 250 milliseconds, identify that That isn't actually Brad Wiskerson in Boise, Idaho. It's somebody in Kazakhstan. So those were the two key technologies initially. Now AI and machine learning are the big thing. We started leveraging it long before it was cool. In fact, when I had to explain what it was. So the way our system works at a very high level is a merchant will send us transactions at the same time as they send the transaction to Visa. We're embedded in their website, or in their order form. So when you hit the Order Now button, it automatically gets shipped, depending on the nature of the integration with the merchant or the payment processor, to Kount. And in 250 milliseconds, which is faster than a human eye can blink, we run it through our supervised machine learning and our unsupervised machine learning. We've been doing unsupervised machine learning since the company's inception, but we broadened to unsupervised machine learning several years ago to enhance our technology. Once we run it through our machine learning systems, then we come up with a persona score and a safety rating, which we ship back to the merchant in real time. So in that sub 250 millisecond, because no online merchant wants any friction at all in their transactions. Consumer doesn't even, we probably usually get back before the Visa auth comes through, the credit card auth comes through. Then the data that we collect and create on the transactions are plugged into our SaaS system, and a merchant can get online and find out more about the end consumer. They can find out hundreds and hundreds of data points on each transaction. We actually on each transaction have more data than any of the card brands, than the merchants themselves, than the banks, because of what we collect and augment and what we create on the Kount system. And then we feed that back to the merchants and provide them an opportunity to review anything that they want to manually review, anything that's on the bubble. And at the end of the day, we provide them with business intelligence through our data mart system, where they can come through and actually prepare reports for the CEO real-time, automatically, on what their fraud trends are, where they're seeing things, where the hot spots are for fraud for them or fraudulent attempts, etc. So that's what we developed after the year of doing surveys with the Internet Retail 100. And we developed it in part because of the things we were doing. So the supervised machine learning and the rules that were created by Tim's original technology. Then we started advancing it based on what we knew that the needs of the marketplace were. And it made us a lot bigger company a lot faster, because we were not operating under assumptions that people would like our technology because it was cool, which a lot of entrepreneurs think. We knew that there was a need. So the very first trade show that we were ever at, when we launched the company, I'll never forget this, in Vegas, we had a crappy trade show booth, and first person that walked, not the first person, the first day, a representative of Staples, who at the time was the #2 online retailer in the world, second only to Amazon, and they're still in the top 5, which shocks people because there's just a lot of, people need a lot of paper, I guess. But they came to us and said, hey, our current fraud system's IBM, it's old, it's outdated, we don't want to replace it because it would be too expensive. What's your stuff do? And we showed them, and the head of fraud control for Staples was a real visionary in all of e-commerce. And he said, I want it now. Can it do this, this, and this? And like every entrepreneur, I said, yep. And I thought, I'm pretty sure. But you say yep. And then you figure it out after that before they have to integrate. Fortunately, we could do it. We eliminated the fraud problem in less than 30 days. And they've seen declining chargebacks year over year, every year since they've been involved with Kount. And they still are actively involved. In fact, I'll be meeting with their guys next week. Fast forward to year 2, which was really the very end of year 1. And Chase Payment Tech was ClickBank's payment processor. It's their acquiring bank. And Chase Payment Tech's CEO was having dinner with me because in a steakhouse in Dallas, I'll never forget that, and because ClickBank was one of their largest clients, one of their top 100 clients. Chase Payment Tech still processes over 51% of the world's card-not-present transactions. So they're the 800-pound gorilla, and we had decided early on who the possible strategic acquirers of Kount would be at the end of the day, like our dream list. And so we decided we would target those folks and have partnerships with them so they knew how well we worked and we could build up relationships with them, so when the time came, we could pull the trigger and start a feeding frenzy. It was a good theory, but Chase Payment Tech was high atop the list because we're like, might as well go for the big guy first. But it kind of happened naturally. So I'm at this dinner talking about ClickBank with the then CEO of Payment Tech, Mike Duffy, and he said, so how's that startup of yours doing, Wiskerson? Stop talking about ClickBank. I said, better than you. And he laughed and said, I run $1 billion company. And I said, yeah, well, how much do you get for each transaction you see? He said, I know that, you know that, a penny. I said, great, I see the same transaction and get a dime. And so I'd rather have dimes than pennies, therefore I'm doing better than you. And you could see him like he was either constipated or contemplative and trying to digest what I had said. And sure enough, the next day he called me in Boise and said, can you fly your team to Dallas and can you teach my team how to turn pennies into dimes? And so shortly thereafter, we signed an exclusive relationship with Payment Tech whereby we're their exclusive fraud control. We're not exclusive to them. They're not exclusive. Yeah. They have to use us. We don't have to only use them. If I wasn't tired, I'd be able to articulate that better. But so we ended up with the 800-pound gorilla in all of payments right out of the chute as a one-year-old company. And I vividly remember thinking, I hope to heck he doesn't ask for an office tour because there's like 10 or 15 of us at the time. And they're going to run all their transactions through us was the goal. So I'm like, oh, crap. And maybe they won't look at financials. Somehow it all worked out. So now we're the exclusive fraud control for the biggest names in payments. Braintree, which is PayPal's payment gateway, Venmo. I'm sure a lot of folks in this room use Venmo. We're their fraud control. BlueSnap, which is the fastest growing payment gateway in all of payments. In fact, they were just named the payment gateway for all of First Data. Big retailers like Dunkin' Brands, Domino's, most of the big video game companies leverage us, which is a huge number of transactions. Local people like bodybuilding.com and 6,500 other merchants. So we were growing really well, and as Eileen had indicated, we had self-funded just with that initial investment of $125,000 from Jeff Hoyle, and had dividended out millions and millions and millions of dollars as a result of that. And through the foresight and sometimes charity of the board of directors, including Eileen, because I remember some board meetings where I was like, oh crap, I got to go in and tell them how we're doing. They kept funding it, and we kept growing and growing and growing. And we did our A round in 2016, and we knew we had 84 unsolicited expressions of interest from PEs, growth equity companies, strategic acquirers, and we hired an investment banker and ultimately selected, because of the personalities of the board of the partners, CVC Capital Partners, who is the largest private equity fund in the world. They're in 23 countries. Most of the people they invest in are like Petco, Breitling watches, and then Kount. So I think we're the rounding error investment. But they invested $80 million in us in our A round in 2016, which is a good A round. Since they invested in 2016, we've grown from 1,500 customers to more than 6,500 customers, from 26 employees to more than 160. We've stopped over $8 billion in fraud, and we've continued to grow our merchant base. Now we're the fraud control for Barclays and many of the other biggest payment providers and players in the payment space. So we're expanding our use cases within each of those banks. Barclays started off with the U.S. unit, but we're doing a hostile world takeover with all of our clients and expanding with them. The largest players in Australia, Telstra, which is the largest corporation in Australia, people like that. So it's been a good couple of years. Most importantly, we've evolved from a transaction-centric solution to really a digital interaction solution. So we've moved fraud control from the point of sale to the first interaction with the consumer. And that does a lot of things. So we are providing valuable insights into the people, the end consumers, to merchants or banks from the time they first hit the website or the first time they log into the app, which enables them to make a number of decisions. One, very early on in the relationship, as opposed to waiting all the way till you get to the order form, they're able to ascertain whether this is a good guy or a bad guy. They're also able to ascertain, hey, this is a really good person, and as we move through our order form process, or excuse me, our sales process, basically our flow, our customer journey, we're going to start them down a different path than we would start a normal person, which enables them to sell higher ticket items, upsell, cross-sell, etc. Or Brad Wiscushen's a schmuck, and we should send him down another path which downsells him and mitigates the chances that we have losses. So we collect and create an enormous amount of data, which if we can feed it back to them in real time at the right point, can actually very materially impact their marketing decisions and their revenue. We've seen clients increase their top line revenue 20, 30%. And I don't know a CFO in the world that doesn't want install us and we'll give you an automatic extra 20% top line growth. That's a pretty good and easy sale to a CFO. So we protect digital transactions globally now. We do transactions in over 180 countries a day. We have data on over 10 billion devices. We've reviewed over $125 billion worth of transactions, and that's growing pretty significantly every year. And the world is our oyster because, unfortunately, fraud is a growth business. So, with that, I'll leave it to questions.
All right, Eileen and Brad, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to begin with Sean with the first question.
So the majority of students that I teach are about to graduate. They're seniors or MBA students that are walking out the door. And often they come to me and we have a discussion about their future, and they're filled with a lot of excitement and a lot of new knowledge and energy. And a lot of them say, I want to be an entrepreneur. But then they say, I have no idea what industry I want to work in. I have no ideas. What should I do? So they have all this excitement and knowledge, but also a lot of uncertainty. So I'm curious if either you have either advice for them or even just a reflection on, if you think back to how your career's evolved from what you planned that it was going to be, that might indirectly give them some advice.
Go ahead, Eileen, you go first, and then
Sure,
I'll explain
yeah.
my Rick and I laughing here, I guess.
So I don't, in the intro, Dean Bannister mentioned that my degree was in chemistry. I thought I was going to be a chemistry teacher. But the internet back then, when I was in college, it existed, and there was gopher mail. It was really just between some government entities and some universities. So I didn't know that I was going to have a career like in tech, and this thing called the internet was going to be commercialized that would even allow that. But I still think that getting your degree and my chemistry degree, even though I'm not using it, and I do remember some basics in chemistry. I'm really good at reading chemical names too. But I think that the problem solving and the analysis and the thinking it's all critical. And so as long as you're just figuring things out, I think I know I'd mentioned in my bit when we were talking about ClickBank and how Kount evolved from it, like you just have to be nimble and figure things out. So, but you also have to be out there being open to opportunities. So we both had other things going on too. So Tim was at Institute for Defense Analysis, and as soon as this started taking off, he just went as an adjunct so that we could still at least have, pay our mortgage payment. But, those were a lot of risks too to take.
Huge.
Yeah, huge risks. But I think it's also believing in your product and seeing an opportunity and getting the right group of people together.
Totally. So. It's all about the team. So if you surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, which is really easy for somebody like me, but you'll go great places. If you look for people who are backup singers, then you'll probably wallow in mediocrity. So I've always tried to hire people that are better and brighter than me. The reason Rick and I were laughing when you asked about career changes is I had a great career as a partner at Holland & Hart. I was, at the time, the youngest person to make partner, and I had a fantastic book of clients and friends, and I thought, well, I'm just going to be a super successful lawyer for the rest of my life. And then Tim, Eileen, and Jeff, we had a lot of interactions about it over the years, but they came to me at the right time, and I thought, well, I'm going to get off the sidelines. I was a corporate lawyer and ran Holland & Hart's business entities and transactions group nationwide, and from the day I made partner, actually. And they came to me at just the right time, and I'm like, I'm going to stop giving people advice and see if I can actually do this business thing. And I had security, like with my career. If it did fail miserably, I would have felt bad for Tim, Eileen, and Jeff because they had really poor judgment hiring me as CEO at the time. I was not the right guy for the job, but I could get back into a law firm fast. So I had a safety net. Unlike Tim and Eileen, who had no safety net when they started it. And there's a lot of people like that in the room, like Ward. You guys probably didn't have a safety net when you started Micron, right? So that takes a lot more guts than I ever had.
I feel like we also had some gut intuition. So we, Tim and I, we met Brad. We moved here in August '99 to Boise, Idaho. We met Brad that very first Thanksgiving through our friend Bayless Manning. But fast forward, I think we were so small, there were just a handful of us. But I think a year later, we had maybe 8 or 9 employees at ClickBank. And we, like Brad had, I don't know why, but we felt compelled that he had to be at our first holiday party that we ever had. Yeah. So Brad and his wife Colleen, it was just maybe just this weird intuition that we had that we knew we were going to steal him away from being a lawyer. Yeah. We still do a lot of lawyerly things though.
Yeah. Too many.
To reading contracts.
Too many contracts. I always love when we're in negotiation and the other CEO says, let's just let all the other lawyers out of the room and you and I will talk. I'm like, okay. That's great. Let's let all the lawyers out of the room and you and I talk. It's like a killer whale throwing a seal up and down before it decides to eat it.
Rick, let's go with our next question.
So, both of you have very interesting backgrounds, and again, if you had just read the backgrounds, if you said, well, how did they get to here? And so one of the things I'm interested in, and one of the things that in the classes that I teach is, we spend a lot of time talking about the various traits that help people, or in some cases make people become successful. So if you had to pick one trait, each of you, what would that trait be that you think is the biggest chunk of your success today?
So I'll answer first. So I already mentioned the ignorance thing, so I won't revisit that. But I always, there's always still that bit of not knowing anything. But I think the other trait is just being fearless. Like I didn't have an MBA. I didn't have, but my neighbor across the street, and it was actually her husband was a Wharton graduate, and she was our first controller because she was a CPA and was at Deloitte too. She's not at that time, but I read some of his books on how to do compensation and corporate structure. So I'm just reading up on things, and we developed everything in house. It's just not being afraid to tackle things. So we had to. Tim was doing all the patents and the intellectual property and he wrote all the code, but I'm tackling everything else. It's customer service, it's tech support, it's the accounting, HR, just setting things up from scratch and just realizing I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. And so just don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to ask questions, until you find the answer.
I don't know if I can do it in one thing.
Is it funny?
Be funny? No. That would get you arrested.
Fearless. I took the good answer, so you can't top that?
No. Our corporate mantra, I have some team members here and former team members, is be open, honest, and fearless. in every communication every day. And we're serious about it. Everybody gives that lip service, but it's true. Like my door is open to the receptionist, anybody in the company who has ideas on how to improve, and we implement it, and everybody's treated with respect. And because you never know whose idea, based on their unique perspective, is going to change the course of your career and the course of your company. Who would have known that Thanksgiving, honestly, that Thanksgiving dinner at Bayless's house, that it would change my entire life, because I met some of the greatest friends I'll ever have, between Eileen and her ex-husband, and their son back there was like 2 at the time, I think. And we were trying to keep him away from the fragile everything in that house.
The treasure cabinet, yeah.
But just be open, honest, and fearless in every transaction. And if you are, then you'll get a reputation. And you never know which direction your career will take you. Bayless Manning, who was one of the founding board members, he was a brilliant man, spoke 10 or 11 languages fluently, broke the Purple Code to end World War II, was the co-founder of the Peace Corps with Sarge Shriver. He was Dean of Stanford Law School, the first president of the Council on Foreign Relations. I mean, he basically did everything, and he was a true genius.
Right. And he was the one that introduced Tim and I to Jeff Hoyle, who I mentioned was our other co-founder and our investor in ClickBank, and then eventually introduced. He was just a master of introductions. So.
Relationship architecture.
Yep.
But he told me once, early in my career at Holland and Hart, Brad, your problem is you, like most young people, have the misconception that a career is a linear path, and you must dissuade yourself of that notion. And he was right. Like, I could have been a comfortable partner at Holland and Hart for the rest of my life and improved my golf game, but this is a much bigger challenge and a lot more fun, because I get to work with people, fantastic team members, and we control our own destiny. So open, honest, and fearless, and see where, and you'll get a reputation and all kinds of opportunities will open up for you.
I love that, open, honest, and fearless. So students, who's open, honest, and fearless and wants to ask the next question? We've got a couple of microphones. Here we do on the front row.
Hi, my name is Quaid. What I wanted to ask you guys is, when you guys originally started the company and you're kind of like working every single day as hard as you can, as much as you possibly can to get this company rolling, how did you kind of keep that spark alive to turn it into a fire and continuously grind every single day until it became something and developed into a bigger company?
Well, I mean, ClickBank, it all just happened so fast. And I think one of the things, like the early days when we were still working out of our house, that was crazy. But once we actually got to Boise and we were able to start hiring really good people, I believe in work-life balance. So now, granted, things changed later as we're then expanding and doing another subsidiary and getting Brad on board as the CEO and with Kount. But for a period of time there, yeah, they're working hard, but working hard doesn't mean working around the clock. I mean, I do believe in, like I said, work-life balance. Brad has a hard time. He struggles with that always. And Colleen, his wife, is hoping that once he started at ClickBank and Kount and Kinetics, well, we didn't have Kount at the time, that he'd get some work-life balance that he didn't have at Holland and Hart. But
yeah, I'm not a work-life balance guy. I give lip service to it, but normally I sleep 2 to 4 hours a night, and I just crank stuff. The team kind of hates that, because they'll get like email when they wake up. There's like emails, but there were certain team members that would actually respond to them at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I started just delaying the delivery of them all till 7 a.m. so that nobody would wake up in the middle of the night, mostly because they would never admit it anyway. They were probably bugged, but I'm not a big work-life balance guy. Probably never will be. I keep trying, but
he advocates for other people.
Oh,
there you go.
It's very important. Very important to have it, unless you're me. So this is a do what I say and not what I do kind of thing.
Next question. All right.
So my question, I suppose, is on your company, ClickBank. I was doing some research on it the other night, and I wanted to know, how do you guys continue to grow ClickBank along with your affiliate marketing programs? Because I believe you have some competition going on with the Amazon Marketplace and Affiliate Marketing Purveyor and a couple of other websites. And ClickBank is still to be honest, I've never heard of it until the previous night, but I was wondering, how do you guys plan on to continue growing ClickBank and making it almost the same, or if not better, than Amazon or those other affiliate marketing companies?
Well, we'd tell you how we're going to make it better, but then we'd have to kill you. Honestly, we've always had competitors at ClickBank, but there's a natural propensity for people in that space to grow revenue without regard to quality and without regard to regulation and rules. And so, without exception, every competitor since the inception of the company has, within a few years, either be a regulator or just natural death, gone away, without a single exception. Amazon's tried it before and failed because it's a rough neighborhood. You got to manage the fraud exactly right, and you've got to manage the clients very aggressively, because once they get a taste of making a lot of money, then they want more. Go figure. We kind of all do, but some of us have scruples, others don't. So we don't deal with the unscrupulous folks, and that's a hard thing to do. I remember one year we had a previous management team, and they were allowing the unscrupulous people to not only stay around but actually grow. And we found out what they were doing, and they still call it a ClickBank Black Tuesday, because I went out of state to that office and one by one fired the execs, and then assembled the rest of the team and said, if you're here, you needn't worry, but we refuse to play these games. And we cut out $100 million worth of revenue. Everything it wasn't all bad, it was just some things that were like, I'm not sure we want to sell that, but in 1 year we cut out $100 million in revenue, and we still grew that year, double digits. So we'll continue to grow and we'll survive because we're not afraid of doing the right thing no matter what the cost.
There you go, fearless. Next hand.
Is that right? Okay. I mean, it was right for me. I didn't want to take the thunder out of you.
Hi, I had a question as far as Kount's concerned with the advancement of quantum computing. Is Kount preparing for that, or is that like a major thing that you guys are looking into as a company?
We've got research teams that are looking into any number of the latest and greatest innovations that'll make our response times even faster, like a quantum computing could do that, to behavioral biometrics, which we've integrated into our solution, nobody else has, which is where I can tell it's Brad Wiskersham based on the angle that he's holding his phone, based on how I'm punching in numbers on the phone or navigating websites. That's another indicator of who it actually is. It's not somebody spoofing me because they've been able to create a synthetic identity with all the information that's available out there through all the various breaches. People tell me all the time, well, I've never had my credit card number's never been breached. I'm like, everybody's credit card numbers have been breached. If you used it in e-commerce significantly at all, it's just there's so many stolen credit card numbers out there that they can't weaponize it. There's websites that aren't on the dark web. You can just go and you can sort by category. I only want to buy credit cards with limits of over $20,000 issued by banks in Iowa, and with open credit, meaning nobody's ever used it before, and with CVV numbers already included, and full names and addresses. And they'll fill it all out for you, and if any of them come back as not usable, they have a same-day refund policy. they actually have better e-commerce practices than most of our e-commerce merchant clients. So the bad guys are vertically and horizontally integrated. They have JVs. It's kind of crazy. So all this technology helps us overcome the fact that basically synthetic identities out there for everybody, and post Equifax, where now they have all your credit information, and post, for example, Marriott. The Marriott breach wasn't bad because of the credit card numbers, it's because everybody who's ever stayed in the Marriott has given them their driver's license number, or if it's international, their passport number. And so now they've got all that in your synthetic identity, which I can buy it for less than $5 and monetize it. So all these new technologies help us figure out if it's really you engaged in the transaction or if it's somebody who had $5.
Next question.
I'm not going to ask you a question I could about what you're going to do next for the community. Instead, I'm going to thank you for all that you've done for our community very quietly, and how much you've done for BSU, and thank you for being here. You're wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ward.
I got to say, anything that we've done is pales in comparison to what you've done. That's Ward Parkinson, the founder of Micron. You can thank him for things like the Green Belt and other major things. There's nobody bigger in the community than Ward, so thank you, Ward.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Austin. So you mentioned that you had a sit-down steak dinner in Dallas, and you kind of mentioned how you can turn pennies into dimes. Did it ever kind of like cross your mind that like saying that could like kill the business deal instead of secure it, or did you just kind of like go for it?
I just go for it. Most of the times when I've been successful negotiating deals, it's because I've been a smartass, and so I just go for it. And
But an honest and fearless and
honest and fearless
open.
smartass. Yeah, that's true. But I think being a smartass is part of.
Yeah.
I mean, I just say what I'm not an idiot, but I pretty much say what I mean. I gave the last class this as an example. Christine Lagarde has a private advisor group of, I don't know, a dozen people. And it's me, the CEO of the division of Alibaba, the CEO of Ripple, the CEO of Chain. It's super over-indexed on crypto. But we were in a meeting in her private boardroom, which is just a normal board table, and I was sitting across from her, and she said, I'd really like to hear your answers to this, but what do you think the most important fintech technology innovation has been in the last decade? And I think it was the CEO of Ripple said, distributed ledger technology. And I went, like that. And like everybody stops and looks at me like, crap, did I do that out loud? And Madame Lagarde was directly across the table from me, and she said, Mr. Skirschen, it appears you don't agree with that. I said, well, if he thinks that the technology that they've never found a use case for that's profitable is the most important and compelling technology in fintech, then yes, he's right. And he passed me down a note from like 4 people, like we're in 3rd grade, that said, get on the DL bandwagon, or yeah, it was DL or
blockchain, or
blockchain. Yeah, it was the blockchain, because half those guys call it blockchain. The other ones don't like the term blockchain because they associate them with Bitcoin. So now it's all DL. But get on the blockchain bandwagon with Skirschen. I'm like, seriously? I just got a note in this room? But true story, unfortunately.
So I guess kind of like to add to that then, do you feel like he saw your confidence and that kind of secured the deal almost then when he contacted you later?
Oh, yeah.
Well, you guys, he already had a good relationship because ClickBank was
one of the largest clients.
Right, and I think he'd already been to a football game with him, right?
No, that came after.
Oh, that came after?
Yeah.
Okay.
We took him he was a huge sports fan. He passed away a few years ago.
Yeah.
Tragically, he was 58.
Yeah.
But it was after we signed the deal. I said, well, why don't you come to Boise, bring the Chase jet out and come to Boise and hang out with us. I'll get us a suite for a Boise State game, because I had to look like we were big rollers when we were a year old. And so we took him to the Boise State-Oregon game where the infamous punch happened, and we were in a suite, which I had rented for one game, and like, oh yeah, have fun. Oh crap, this is expensive. But he walked out and to his dying day said, single greatest sport event he ever went to was a Boise State football game. So,
All right.
So.
I'm going to ask a question that ties to Boise. Eileen, why did you decide to uproot from Southern California and come to Boise?
Well, okay, so we had our garage office, and we knew we had one, you know, Raina, who's across the street, is our part-time controller. Jeff's in Colorado. Bayless Manning's on our board, is here. Tim and I are there. We also had another woman doing part-time customer service, like 20 hours a week. And we knew it became apparent to us that we're going to actually grow and get office space, and San Diego just didn't feel like the place that we wanted to do that. We want to be able to pay people competitive wages and to have them feel like they can earn a livelihood and not live in a box under a bridge. And so in San Diego, $15 an hour for starting out for customer service doesn't afford you anything. So I think we knew we'd need people at all levels, and we had another board member in Seattle, so we really could have ended up anywhere, but Bayless Manning toured us around Boise, and we just fell in love with Boise. And a part of me feels like I grew up East Coast in McLean, Virginia. When I go back to Virginia now, it's crazy, the traffic, but there's something about Boise that reminded me of Little McLean. It just has a good feel to it. So. Yeah, Bayless really sold us on it and toured us around. I remember him driving us to the library where it said Boise with the exclamation point. He's like, Yahoo stole that. So yeah, he felt like, and this man could have lived anywhere in the world. And it's really, how did he end up here is probably the more, like, that's why we ended up here, but how did he end up here? I don't even know, but he just felt like Boise is a small city that had everything to offer.
When he was dean of Stanford Law School, he came here.
For Sun Valley, maybe?
Well, no, he came here, that happened on the trip, but he came here to raise money from Stanford alums in Boise, and he fell in love with it, and so he said, I need to buy a property in Idaho because I want to retire here. He went from Stanford to Manhattan, where he lived in one of the most fantastic buildings ever, but, and when he went, so while he was here in Boise that trip, he went to Sun Valley and bought a condominium, which is part of the Sun Valley Lodge, for, I think it was $19,000. And that was his anchor to Idaho. And then he retired and moved to Warm Springs. But that's how he was on a fundraising trip and just fell in love with it. And then he's basically the Chamber of Commerce head for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd like to thank each of our speakers and provide you with a gift of our appreciation.
Thank you. Wow.
And I'd like to ask our audience to please show your appreciation. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. Very cool. Thank you.